Now, y'all know some gridiron heroes had the world on a string, but bless their hearts, not everyone played their cards right. We're talking about Aaron Hernandez, whose dark side led him from the end zone straight to a murder charge for killing his buddy Odin Lloyd, and Michael Vick, whose dog-fighting mess shook this whole country to its core. When the law busted former Virginia Tech gunslinger Michael Vick for that dog-fighting ring, well, it was a sight nobody expected. Here's the sad tale of them ball players who took a match to their own livelihoods. Let's start with Aaron Hernandez. That boy was once shining brighter than a Friday night light in a small town. He was tearing it up as a tight end for them, New England Patriots, helping him get to Super Bowl 46, and teaming up with Rob Gronkowski to make a duo scary enough to spook a ghost. Just 20 years old, pocket full of cash, famous as all get out, and a future looking sweeter than peach cobbler. But beneath them, touchdowns and fancy headlines lurked a man fixin' to wreck it all with some mighty poor choices. Come 2013, Hernandez's life went completely off the rails. Cops slapped cuffs on him for murdering Odin Lloyd, a semi-pro baller who was dating the sister of Hernandez's own gal. The lawmen reckoned Hernandez was scared Lloyd was gonna spill the beans on some dark secrets. Instead of handling it like a man, Hernandez allegedly set up a hit on his own friend. They filled Lloyd with lead and left him lying just a country mile from Hernandez's front door. The Patriots didn't waste no time, they cut him loose quicker than a greased pig, and the NFL washed its hands of him before he could truly shine. In court, them prosecutors painted Hernandez as a cold-blooded fella who'd kill just to keep his name clean. By 2015, the gavel dropped guilty of first-degree murder, locked up for life, with no chance of ever seeing the sun as a free man again. Judge read it out plain. Defendant Aaron Hernandez, guilty of murder in the first degree. Even behind bars, trouble followed him like a shadow, though he did beat the rap on a 2012 double killing up in Boston. But by then, his good name was mud, and there weren't no washing it off. Stories came out about him running with gangs, keeping hideout apartments full of iron and dope, and just being meaner than a rattlesnake inside and out. Folks who knew him said he could charm the birds out of the trees 1 minute and blow his top the next, walking a dangerous line. Life in the pen was a roller coaster. He found religion, started reading the good book, and tried patching things up with his kin. But he was also smoking that synthetic junk, getting into trouble, and scrapping with other inmates like a wildcat. Despite all that ruckus, folks said he seemed eerily calm right before the end. On April 19, 2017, 5 days after beating that Boston charge, they found him hanging by his bedsheets in his cell, dead and gone. After he passed, doctors found he had CTE, that brain rot you get from banging heads too many times on the field. Makes folks wonder if that sickness was driven the demons in his head the whole time. Moving on, let's talk about Michael Vick, a fella who torched his whole career running an illegal dog-fighting operation now that just ain't right. Vick was the big kahuna, the first pick back in 2001, tearing it up at Virginia Tech and playing quarterback like nobody'd ever seen before. That boy could outrun a jackrabbit, throw the pigskin from wild angles, and get the crowd roaring like thunder. Atlanta thought he was their savior, but while the cameras were flashing, Vick was making choices that'd drag his name through the mud and stain his legacy forever. By 2007, things went south fast for him. He was running Bad News Kennels, a nasty illegal dog-fighting setup, and he wasn't just writing the checks, no sir. He was in the muck, training them, and personally killing the ones that wouldn't fight, hanging, beating, and drowning them poor critters. When the feds kicked the door down, folks were madder than a wet hen, and sponsors dropped him like a hot potato. The NFL suspended him indefinitely, and in a blink, he went from superstar hero to national zero. In July 2007, the law came knocking for Vick and 3 buddies on federal charges for running that interstate ring. He manned up and pleaded guilty to conspiracy and funding that cruel business. Vick admitted to paying for it, watching the fights, taking the money, and personally killing 6 to 8 dogs with his own hands. While out on bail, he went and failed a drug test, just digging his hole deeper. In December 2007, the judge gave him 23 months in the slammer and made him cough up nearly $1 million to care for them rescued dogs. Lots of them needed care for life, and the Falcons cut him loose right then and there. His career looked deader than a doornail, but come 2009, the Philadelphia Eagles gave him a shot at redemption. He snagged a division title in 2010, made the Pro Bowl, and got Comeback Player of the Year, but injuries and rusty play slowed him down. He hung up his cleats in 2017, turned to coaching, and started working with the Humane Society, begging folks to treat animals right and saying sorry for his sins. Next up, we got another player who wrecked his shop with some wild behavior. Johnny Manziel. Now, folks talk about shooting stars, but Johnny Football was a supernova waiting to explode. A gunslinger down at Texas A&M, he tore up the rulebook as a redshirt freshman, becoming the first young buck to toss for 3,000 yards and hoof it for another 1,000 in a single season. He didn't just win the Heisman Trophy and the Davy O'Brien Award. He owned them, snagged the Manning Award too, and steered the Aggies to a 41-13 stomping of Oklahoma in the Cotton Bowl. Every scout from here to El Paso reckoned he was destined for Sunday glory. But Lord, Manziel's personal demons were fixin' to burn that dream to the ground. When the Cleveland Browns picked him 22nd overall in the 2014 draft, the hype train was louder than a freight train. But right out of the gate, his mind wasn't on the game. He was chasing neon lights and whiskey bottles, partying hard when he should have been studying. Coaches were pulling their hair out because he'd show up unprepared, and his teammates were getting madder than a wet hen at his lack of discipline. Even before he got drafted, the writing was on the wall. His behavior was about as professional as a bull in a china shop. His agent said it was like herding cats, just getting him to the finish line, with Johnny showing up to big meetings looking like he'd been rode hard and put up wet. And if that wasn't enough, trouble off the field started multiplying like rabbits. Domestic violence claims, public boozing, and reckless nights he was making headlines for all the wrong reasons. All that talent got buried under a mountain of bad choices, branding him as a man you couldn't trust with a 10-foot pole. To make matters worse, that backyard scrambling style that worked in college got eaten alive in the NFL, and there was a silent battle raging in his head. Doctors later said it was bipolar disorder, but the poor guy fought that war for years without the right armor. He admitted later on that he just quit on himself, lost his grit, and let the darkness take the wheel. The Browns cut him loose in 2016 after barely 14 games. He tried to claw his way back in the CFL and other leagues, but between injuries and contracts, he just couldn't get his boots back on solid ground. But Manziel's fall from grace went deeper than the gridiron. He blew through millions, pushed away his kin, and confessed he once stared down the barrel of a gun, only surviving because the trigger jammed. Now, shifting gears to a darker tale, we got Ray Rice, a man who flushed his whole career down the drain over one elevator ride. Ray Rice was a tank for the Baltimore Ravens. Drafted in the second round back in 2008, he was the foundation that franchise stood on. A three-time Pro Bowler and a champ in Super Bowl 47, Rice was sitting pretty at number 2 in the Ravens' record books for rushing yards and touchdowns. But on February 15, 2014, after too many drinks at a casino in Atlantic City, Rice and his fiancée, Janae Palmer, got into a heated spat. That fuss followed him into an elevator, where it looked like Palmer might have spit right in Rice's face. Rice didn't walk away. He clocked her, hit her so hard she smashed her head on the rail and went lights out. Then he dragged her body out like a sack of potatoes. When folks saw that, the outcry was louder than thunder. At first, the NFL just slapped his wrist with a 2-game suspension, which folks rightly called a crying shame. The Ravens tried to say it was a serious matter, but their words were empty as a dry creek bed. On March 27, 2014, a grand jury indicted him for assault. He married Palmer a few weeks later, believe it or not. Even though the law let him off with counseling, his good name was mud. The pot boiled over in September 2014 when the tape inside the elevator came out ugly, raw, and undeniable. The public fury forced the Ravens to cut him and the NFL to ban him indefinitely. He fought the ban and won, but no team in their right mind would sign him. Sponsors ran for the hills. Madden NFL 15 erased him from the game, and a career that looked like a Hall of Fame lock was dead in the water. Rice later said he was sorry, said there's no excuse for hitting a woman, calling it a horrible mistake. He flirted with a comeback, but eventually hung up his cleats for good. Lastly, we got a story that'll chill your bones, a player whose criminal heart led to murder. Ray Caruth. Folks once thought he was the next big thing at wide receiver. A first-round pick in 1997, an All-American, and the young hope for the Carolina Panthers. He started strong, looking like the face of the franchise, but behind that helmet was a man whose cold heart would ruin everything. On November 16, 1999, Caruth made a choice that destroyed lives forever. His girl, Cherika Adams, 24 years old and carrying his son, was 8 months along. The law said Caruth didn't want to pay a dime for that child and wanted the baby and the mother gone. Instead of facing the music like a man, he went and cooked up a scheme to put her in the ground. It happened on a back road in Charlotte, where Caruth boxed her in, trapping her like a rat, while his partner in crime, Van Brett Watkins, rolled up alongside and started blasting with a .357 Magnum. That poor gal took 4 slugs. Even hurt as bad as she was, she had the grit to dial 911 and spill the whole ugly truth, telling the operator how Caruth blocked her path just seconds before the shooting started. She slipped into a deep coma not long after getting to the hospital, so the docs had to act fast and perform an emergency C-section to save that little one. The baby, Chancellor Lee Adams, pulled through, bless his heart, but going 70 minutes without a breath of air left him with permanent brain damage and cerebral palsy. Cherika hung on for a month before passing on, and at first, Caruth posted a $3 million bond, swearing he'd turn himself in if either the mama or the baby didn't make it. But the minute Cherika took her last breath, Caruth took off running. The law caught up with him the very next day in Tennessee, curled up in a car trunk outside a motel like a coward, sitting on $3,900 cash, some candy bars, and bottles of his own urine. The Panthers cut ties with him quicker than lightning, and the NFL suspended him indefinitely right then and there. In court, the prosecutors painted a dark picture, claiming Caruth hired Watkins to do the deed, all because Cherika wouldn't agree to an abortion. His lawyers tried to spin a yarn about a drug deal gone bad, but the jury wasn't buying a word of that nonsense. He managed to dodge a first-degree murder rap and the death penalty, but the judge slapped him with 18 to 24 years, and he finally walked free in October of 2018 after rotting in a cell for near 19 years. Now, let's chew the fat about Plaxico Burress, a fella whose own foolishness wrecked a stellar NFL career. Man, Plaxico Burress was a firecracker of a wide receiver, one of the most dangerous men on the gridiron. The Steelers snatched him up 8th overall back in the year 2000, and later he became a hero for the New York Giants, snagging that game-winning catch in Super Bowl 42 to spoil the Patriots' perfect season. For a good long while, nobody could stop him between the hash marks. But one single night in 2008 brought his whole world crashing down. It was November 28, 2008, and Burress was partying at a New York City nightclub, packing a Glock pistol he had no business carrying. He went to shimmy that gun around in his pocket and bang, he accidentally put a bullet right through his own thigh. The wound wasn't gonna kill him, but the fallout sure was painful. 2 days later, he walked into the station and surrendered for criminal weapon possession. He was staring down the barrel of felony charges, years in the slammer, and a name that was mud. The Giants didn't hesitate. They suspended him without a dime for the rest of the 2008 season and put him on the injury list so he couldn't play a lick in the playoffs. Burress threw down $100,000 for bail, but it didn't take long for him to reckon that this mess had done permanent damage to his playing days. Come August 2009, he took a plea bargain that landed him in prison for 20 months, followed by 2 years of having the law watch his every move. He spent his absolute athletic prime sitting behind bars, which pretty much put a nail in the coffin of his glory days with the Giants. Once he got out, he tried to make a comeback with the Jets and Steelers, but the magic was gone. He only hauled in 48 passes and never got back to playing like the star he used to be. Away from the game, his money dried up, and the legal headaches kept coming. He was drowning in lawsuits, tax trouble, and foreclosure. He even had to hawk his Super Bowl ring just to pay the bills. In 2015, the taxman came calling for $46,000 he hadn't paid, landing him on probation with a heap of penalties to pay back. Even though his football career had gone belly up, Burress tried to keep his face in the spotlight. He co-wrote a book called Giant, The Road to the Super Bowl, showed up on Celebrity Wife Swap, and did a little talking as an analyst for Sportsnet New York. Now, shift your gaze over to a fella whose political stands pretty much ran him out of the league. Colin Kaepernick. That boy shot up through the NFL ranks like a rocket. The San Francisco 49ers grabbed him in the second round back in 2011 to sit behind Alex Smith, but by the middle of 2012, he took the reins and marched that team straight to Super Bowl 47. He made a name for himself as a quarterback who could run just as well as he threw, and in 2013, he carried them all the way to the NFC Championship game. But come 2016, Kaepernick was fixing to head straight into a storm of controversy. During the preseason of 2016, he started sitting down during the national anthem to make a fuss about racial injustice and police roughness. After jawing with a veteran named Nate Boyer, he decided to take a knee instead, a way to show respect to the troops while still getting his point across. Let me tell you, that lit a fire under the whole country. Fans, news folks, and politicians all had a fit. Some called him a traitor to the flag, while others said he had a whole lot of guts. It turned into a wedge that split folks right down the middle, even catching the eye of President Donald Trump and every big news station in the land. He said flat out, "I'm gonna keep sitting. I'm fixin' to keep standing with the folks who are getting stepped on." Even though the boy could still sling the rock, the owners reckoned his protesting made him more trouble than he was worth. Those teams were scared stiff of angry fans, sponsors pulling their money, and the media turning everything into a circus. Well, come February 2019, Kaepernick shook hands on a hush-hush deal with the league, pretty much hanging up his cleats for good. Now, the boy could still sling the pigskin well enough to ride the bench, but he stirred up a hornet's nest so big, ain't a single team would touch him with a 10-foot pole. Once he stepped off the gridiron, Kaepernick poured all that energy into fighting for what he reckoned was right. He kicked off the Know Your Rights camp, gave away millions like it was candy, and partnered up with big dogs like Nike and Ben & Jerry's to preach fairness and push folks toward eating greens. Now gather round, cause this next tale is about a fella named Josh Gordon, whose career got swallowed whole by his demons. When Gordon first stepped on the turf, folks swore he was the most gifted pass catcher the good Lord had made in a generation. The Cleveland Browns snatched him up in the second round of the 2012 supplemental draft, and right out the gate, he looked slicker than a greased pig. His first year was sturdy enough, but come 2013, he lit up the sky like the 4th of July. Even after sitting out 2 games for trouble, he racked up 1,646 yards in just 14 games, beating everybody else in the league. He etched his name in the history books as the first Buck to ever post back-to-back 200-yard games, earning himself a spot on the All-Pro team and a ticket to the Pro Bowl rodeo. Didn't matter if you were a coach, a player, or a guy in a suit talking on TV, everyone sang the same tune. Gordon was a once-in-a-decade wildcat, but behind all them flashy plays, his whole world was hanging by a thread thinner than a spider's web, and it was fixin' to snap. We're talking about a long, hard battle with addiction. Gordon's trouble with the bottle and the pills started way before he ever saw a pro stadium. He confessed to dipping into drugs back in middle school, stealing gadgets to pay for his fix, and getting booted out of more schoolhouses than you can count on one hand. Down in Houston during high school, he fell in with a rough crowd, slanging dope, toting pistols, and knocking back vodka right there in the classroom. Over at Baylor, the law caught up with him when they found him and a buddy passed out cold in a Taco Bell drive-thru with bags of the bad stuff. Later on, he spilled the beans that a coach helped him cheat the drug tests so he could keep playing, at least until he failed another one and got benched indefinitely. When he got to the big leagues, it was just the same old song and dance. Even though he was tearing it up on Sundays, Gordon admitted he was often liquored up or high as a kite before kickoff, missing meetings and showing up late with eyes redder than a devil's backside. The gavel came down fast and furious. He got hit with 2 games in 2013 and a whole season ban that got knocked down to 10 games in 2014. Then came a full-year timeout in 2015, and he tried to get back in 2016 but struck out swinging multiple times. Even when they let him back in the gate in 2017, he only lasted 5 games before the wagon threw him off again. Teams kept betting on him, though. Cleveland, New England, Seattle, Kansas City, Tennessee, they all gave him a shot, but every single ride ended in the exact same ditch. Another rule broken, another ban with no end date. Gordon later said he reckoned the rules didn't apply to him, thinking he could just keep pulling the wool over their eyes. By the time he woke up and smelled the coffee, his career was already dead and buried. Moving on down the line, we got a fella whose career was wrecked by foolhardy choices, Ryan Leaf. Now, Ryan wasn't just some run-of-the-mill quarterback. He was the second name called in the 1998 draft, right on the heels of Peyton Manning, and he shone brighter than a harvest moon back at Washington State. Being a Heisman finalist, Leaf had a cannon for an arm, talent to spare, and a walk that said he owned the place. But faster than a summer storm, all that promise came crashing down. His first year with the San Diego Chargers was a genuine train wreck. He threw 2 touchdowns against 15 picks, and made a name for himself fighting with coaches, teammates, and the news folks like a cat in a sack. Even big dogs like Junior Seau and Rodney Harrison were grumbling loud about his sour attitude. Between his poor play, his hair-trigger temper, and a mind that wandered, he went from a superstar in the making to one of the biggest flops in the history of the game. Injuries just added fuel to the fire. A bum shoulder kept him on the sidelines for all of 1999, and a wrist that wouldn't heal led him down a dark road with painkillers. By 2001, after bouncing around the Chargers, Cowboys, Buccaneers, and Seahawks, his time in the league was done as a dinner turkey. Leaf's life off the field went into a tailspin, too. He fell into drugs, burglary, and all sorts of trouble with the law, ending up serving time in the state pen more than once between 2010 and 2014. Things got so dark in 2012 he tried to take his own life, but bless his heart, his story didn't end in the dirt. After years of wrestling with addiction and the law, he found the straight and narrow. He became an ambassador for the Transcend recovery community, speaking up for folks struggling in their minds and with the bottle. He made his way back to football, not in a helmet, but talking specifically as an analyst, radio host, and commentator. Now, on the flip side, we got a player whose career was torn to shreds because he couldn't stop breaking the law. Todd Marinovich. That boy walked onto the field carrying a heavier load of expectations than a mule in a gold mine, more than just about any quarterback of his time. Born back in 1969, folks all over the country started calling him the Robo QB, like he was built in a lab by his daddy, Marv Marinovich, a former USC captain and muscle man who treated his boy like a science project. From eating rabbit food to workouts stricter than boot camp, Todd's whole life spun around that pigskin. By the time he landed at USC, he was the talk of the town from coast to coast, a quarterback bred specifically to rule the gridiron. The LA Raiders snatched him up first round back in 1991, reckoning they'd found their golden boy, but truth is, beneath all that shine, Marinovich was already coming undone like a cheap suit. Back in 1991, whilst he was still running with USC, the law nabbed him for holding dope, just a little taste of the trouble fixin' to dog his heels for years to come. Once he donned that Raiders silver and black, things went sideways quicker than a jackrabbit. He was flunking drug tests left and right, couldn't follow orders, and stayed locking horns with the coaching staff. Now, the boy could sling the pigskin when he had a mind to, no doubt about it, but his shenanigans off the grass cast a shadow so long it swallowed up all his talent. 2 seasons in, the Raiders decided they'd had enough and cut him loose, and just like that, the big-time NFL career everyone bet on was dead in the water. From there on out, the bottle and the needle ran the show. Come 1997, the law locked him up again, and he spent months sitting in the pokey and minimum security. By the year 2000, he was catching charges for assault, and it didn't take long before he got busted for dope again in 2001. The whole decade of the 2000s was just a sad old broken record, handcuffs, rehab centers, and trying to get back on the horse, only to fall right off again. In 2005, Newport Beach PD found him holed up in a public restroom with his fixins, telling folks he was just an unemployed artist and anarchist. The judge threw the book at him with mandatory rehab, but bless his heart, he just couldn't keep his nose clean and fell off the wagon every time. He took a swing at getting back in the game, playing up in the CFL and the Arena League, but them demons of his tackled him before he could ever reach the end zone. Come 2007, he was fighting the law and getting busted for possession again, though he did have a spell where he dried out, teaching young bucks and speaking at recovery centers. Sadly, that straight and narrow road didn't last long, and by 2009, he was back in the slammer for skipping out on a court date. The wildest story happened in 2016, when folks in Irvine found him buck naked in a neighbor's backyard, high as a Georgia pine, and trying to pry open a sliding glass door. Reckon he finally decided to lay his burdens down, turning his focus to his artwork, getting sober, and doing some serious soul-searching. Y'all head on down to the comment section and tell us what you reckon about this whole mess. And before you hit the dusty trail, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe to NFL Rivals, so you don't miss out on the next yarn we spin.